All right, since we're at the top of the hour, I'll get things started. Welcome to the Sustainable Project Delivery Virtual Training Series. This week's webinar is on materials. My name is Kelli Polzin. I'm with Northwestern Division in the Engineering and Construction Group, and I'll be supporting our hosts today and monitoring the chat for your questions that we'll try to answer as we're going through this material. And today's host is Nicole Burman from our Kansas City district. She joined the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in the summer of 2009 as an interior designer for Kansas City District's design branch, eventually receiving her lead certification and becoming a registered interior designer. She has primarily worked on military design projects within the region, including several mega and international projects. Her current role is serving as the acting design branch technical service section chief, where she supports the district in AE acquisitions and the value engineering program. For many years, she utilized her lead training as the district's sustainability manager, where she helped facilitate high performance and sustainable designs, leading many of those projects to LEED Silver and Gold certifications. And with that, I'll turn it over to Nicole.
Awesome. Thank you, Kelli. I attempted to turn off all those links coming out, so hopefully we won't hear people coming in here. Okay, welcome everybody. As Kelli indicated, we're going through materials today. Really, we're looking at understanding the materials that are being installed in the building, looking with a sustainability lens of that, so wanting to utilize environmentally preferred items, lessening materials, lessening virgin materials, lessening toxic materials. So that's really where we're focused on today. Next slide, we have our objective to really understand, at least be able to understand one, define one of these, but we've got 5 sustainability categories to look through. And if you've been on here before, we have a resource page that has many links that can be useful in your process for sustainability items. This one particularly added those green procurement links, so some tools that you'll also see listed in the follow-on slides as we talk about them. Those are great tools to be able to try to dive down into what kind of materials are supporting these UFC requirements. So today we're diving into the UFC 1-200-02, section 2-6, looking at that reduced environmental impact of materials. This section dives into 2 parts, really. First one being that environmentally preferred product, and then that second part being that waste and material management. So the environmental preferred products then brings us into 3 subcategories, and that is looking at that recycled content, that biologically based, so BioPreferred product, and then the ozone depleting substances. And then we've got that waste and material management, looking at the storage and collection of recyclables, and then the waste diversion. So here we're kind of at that high level, really looking at the environmentally preferred products. We're being asked to find construction materials and building supplies that have less or reduced effect on the human health and environment, really over that life cycle use and implementing those products and services. And so we have a tool that's listed there. One of those is the sustainability, so the SF tool to find some of those materials. The challenging part of the environmentally preferred products really comes down to a subjective view, right? As we dive into this, we'll see that several of them don't have definable thresholds. What does lesser and reduced effect mean? And so sometimes it's a little harder to quantify in a lot of our specifications in our products. How do we hold contractors to that? And so we'll go through a few things to help us in that and defining that within our specifications today. And so we also, when we're looking at a UFC item, we also want to make sure, and we'll note this again later too, we're really looking at to make sure that our DAs, so either the ones we're creating in-house or the ones that we're reviewing, are being very specific in what's being accomplished and how it's meeting the UFC, and then equally specific about what's not being met and looking for why. What is the intent? Was there something discovered, right, in design that prohibits certain types of materials for pursuing what we're talking about today? So that's just a note to make sure we continue to fully identify those challenges. So here we'll dive into that recycled content. We're really looking, the UFC calls out that to utilize the Resource Conservative and Recovery Act, that's section 6002, compliant products. And it asks for it to meet or exceed the EPA's recycled content recommendations. When we go to that website, actually, it also references the 42 U.S. Code 6962, federal procurement. And that is actually where it specifically says specifications, are required to use recovered material to the maximum extent possible without jeopardizing the intent of the end user or the end use of that item, right? And so this is where things get a little sticky. Really, when I've read these items, I'm looking at the maximum intent possible by the U.S. Code to meet and exceed that EPA recycled content recommendation. I find that then when I dive into that procurement, so our second bullet here, that comprehensive procurement guideline examples then go into recommendations. So things that have been found, the EPA, what those thresholds really are. And here's an example of that really with the product, looking at building roofing materials, looking at steel, aluminum. All of these have different post-consumer content and total recovery. So we're looking at both that post-consumer and then what is that whole recovery item together in the percentages. And some of them have ranges, some of them have more specific things. Steel is more specific because of the recycled content we know to be true, depending on the type of, and we'll dive into this in one of my examples, but depending on the type of processing that it has. And so that's why we have some of those ranges. So we're looking to apply those to our projects, but we also want to make sure that we're applying them appropriately. So whenever we dive into our projects, we want to be pulling up our specification. We want to be pulling up the EPA website, maybe some of these other tools. and looking at what's that range should we be meeting? What's the intent of that project, right? That product that needs to be applied. There's some other constraint by the mission that requires us to maybe not go to a certain level. And then we find that that level of product or durability restricts us for our post-consumer or our total recovery. And we want to pull all of that stuff together in addition to ensuring that we have multiple manufacturers. So materials, there's several types of materials that we know work, but as you go through this, it's important to have those things up and ready and looking through that selection to then ensure that that specification is edited, right? Making sure that we're really looking at the materials specification. Some of them or most of our specs have either defined percentages in them or a spot to place that percentage. And so that's what we're trying to fill in, that blank here, and to what extent for your project. The other item that I threw in here at the bottom really is also just a reminder, Army policy actually adds or furthers this preferred product element here and asking for a minimum of 15% of the building materials to be regional. And so we have a question I see here. Kathleen, you have, is the 15% of the building material based on the 15 or some other measure? Maybe I'm not understanding. We're talking about the regional materials, I assume? So I would say, I guess, my experience is 15% of that, of the building materials as a whole, of the cost of materials. Awesome. And so that's a tricky one too, because LEED goes by cost, and so that's what I'm most quick to answer is yes, in the sense that that's what we've done in the past in validating the UFC. I do not believe, Kelly, have you had this experience? I don't believe the UFC specifies that.
Research that one real quick and get back to you. I think I can track that down.
Yeah, that's a good question. So we'll try to track that down for our answer here in the policy probably. Okay. So we touched on with recycled content, we touched on a couple items here. So this is really a slide to help us make sure that we all understand what we're talking about when it comes to that recovered product. So we're looking at that post-consumer and that pre-consumer. That pre-consumer is that diverted during manufacturing or used for another purpose. That post-consumer is what we most likely are very familiar with, right? Recycling products when we're, in the office, recycling products when we're out in the field to divert that from the wasteland and such. And so here too, I find this interesting when we're trying to think what that pre-consumer could be. I know that whenever you potentially have done manufacturing tours and stuff like that, a lot of manufacturers talk about how they utilize it's not only a good sustainable item, but it's also great for their own bottom line, right? To reutilize maybe that waste that got pulled off. But there is one largest contributor to the industry in this, and that actually is the textile industry. So they recycle the fibers, fabrics, new garments and stuff that then they can buy with the third-party buyers and so forth that weren't utilized or unsold. So that's really, I think, where it kicked off strong there. Okay, so it looks like we have an answer in here. The sum of recycled content and salvage material contained shall be equal to minimum 10% based on the cost. So we're looking at the cost of that total building. Okay, so that checks out for what percentage we're looking at there when we're trying to talk about percentages and accomplishing our goals here. So diving into an example, really I picked toilet partitions as one, but utilizing that, and really here it says the Sustainability Facility Tool website, really that actually allows you to search in a different way for procurement, green procurement, but it also brings you back into that EPA comprehensive procurement information, okay? So here, if you're searching for partitions and you're looking for that toilet partition, it brings up steel and plastic as the products that they have identified here. And in that, for that post-consumer, it specifically says that 16 or 67% post-consumer for the steel. And again, they have a note, written about that. Really, the difference there, and not a range, is how it's been created. So the 67% is actually created or can be identified if we're specifically specifying a steel partition that was electric air furnace. Okay, that's how it was created, that steel. And so that could then range from that 67% post-consumer all the way to 100% of it being recovered steel. And then, of course, it varies, right? If we're utilizing plastic, there can be a range of 20 to 100% post-consumer. So this is where I would implore any designer to go look, hey, if I'm applying a plastic toilet partition, I'm looking for, a few manufacturers. I know a few that do higher recycled content. So let's see, do I have, a minimum of 3 that all can meet maybe 60%? That's our goal, and that's what we're going through. That meets all the requirements we have by our users. And let's go ahead and add that 60% post-consumer requirement in there, and have that be the goal that we're obtaining for that project. And then we also have an example here if you're looking for other, right? If it's not steel, if it's not plastic, but it's a composite panel, there has an opportunity, and we'll talk shortly about like the bio-based content. So there may be other ways that you're pursuing this environmentally preferred product when you're looking at and considering material types. So as we touched on here, if I'm utilizing this example, I'm looking to select that appropriate material. What is that material? Going to be steel, plastic, composite. Then we dive into reviewing that manufacturing data. Do I have products that meet that comprehensive procurement guideline, right? That percentages that we're trying to do our best to meet. And then we want to verify that there's competition. And then we want to confirm that the specification adds that minimum or add it if it is not currently there. Okay, so then we'll dive into the next category, is really that biologically preferred products. So we're looking, the UFC is calling out the Farm Security Rural Investment Act, Section 9002. And so we're wanting that product to be composed of the highest percentage of bio-based content consistent with the USDA BioPreferred program. And so here, we really want to do our best to find a product that can meet these requirements. But again, as I mentioned before at the beginning, right, there's no specific thresholds we're meeting here. We're trying to do it to the maximum extent possible per the code. So if we aren't able, like if we know that there's certain products that have BioPreferred items that are defined in the BioPreferred program, we need to be, but we're not able to utilize those in our procurement, we need to be able to document that. So again, we're looking to document in our DAs and our projects why we're not able to select that product. There can be a whole range of reasons, right, of why we can't select that, and that normally is pushed by a mission requirement that would not allow us to work towards that. But what we have here, and I have examples shown up here, is that BioPreferred website has several categories that you can work into. I have construction picked here. There are a lot of links to manufacturing products that can be investigated further, right? So this would be one of those things when we're selecting products to have up, verify, double check that if we have an opportunity and it's shown there, do some verification. I will though note that this website does go through an auditing process from what I can tell, and they go out, the USDA goes out to ask and solicit that, products are still existing, but it's not on a, from what I can tell, on a very frequent, right? If we're building every year, it may not have been updated, that year. So some items will be out for an audit, and I have seen certain ones that we've linked and they specifically say it has not been validated or they didn't respond, right? That manufacturer didn't respond back to say that this is still a product. So that's the one thing that I've occurred, that has happened to me, was really that I'm trying to find something I think, hey, I could try to utilize this in my project, but then the product itself really wasn't viable anymore, right? Materials change, especially for interior, quite frequently. So that's something to identify or to track down. But we do have examples of areas that we're looking at for that biological-based product. So when we have a bio-based project, there's a range of materials. When you go on that website, you'll see a whole bunch of materials that maybe you didn't even realize had bio-based materials in it, right? But some of them can be visibly different from what maybe we're used to, and then even range to stuff that we use all the time, and that doesn't really present any outward change. And so we see that example here in this slide where we've got a cost from Joint Base with Nicole utilizing agri-fiber cabinets here. So that looks visibly different than what we would typically have, right? But then we also have an acoustical ceiling tile shown here, which looks exactly the same as what we're all used to, probably over your head right now. And so really we are also wanting to make sure we understand here that many of these products really don't require any significant changes to install either. They're typically, products that have been adjusted or just percentages of that bio-based material added. So with the cabinets here, even though this may be a new product when it was installed, it actually would be installed pretty much the same that any other cabinet would be installed, right? But we always want to stay diligent in our 3-phase inspection process, because if there is a small nuance, that's the time that we can bring that to the installer's attention, or they to us, right, in our QA efforts, and make sure that we understand what that small change is. I also like to bring up the acoustical tile here as an example. I think that this is an example of a bio-based product that should be verified and used on all of our projects. There are many, many products that meet the requirements, and so we should make sure that we review and ensure that the design and the product is installed here. So just the nature of that product for the acoustical tile really lends itself to a good use and example of meeting that bio-based product. So for pursuing third-party certification, LEED here as an example has several credits that are focused on what we see or in line with material selection. So they have 3 here that has the building product disclosures. Okay, so that's a theme throughout. The first one, looking at that environmentally preferred declaration. So here, really trying to find manufacturers who have verified improving that life cycle impact. Looking at that environmental, ecologically, socially preferred products there. Then we have opportunities for credits for sourcing of raw materials. This is where what we've just talked about in our UFC items really falls naturally into the raw materials one. So we're looking at that bio-based recycled content, wood products, if we're pursuing that as part of this credit. So trying to find products that are extracted in resources in a responsible manner. And then finally, looking at that material ingredients. So what is the product made of? There's chemicals that make the product, you know, if they're not the sourcing of raw materials, but we're really diving into what is helping us get away from, right? Maybe chemicals and ingredients of a product that aren't good for us. Some examples here are third-party certification or certified products that meet cradle to cradle. Declare is another one. There's a few more that really we could add to this list that help move us towards, you know, that life cycle impact element that's going to help us through the years, that have better ingredients to the product itself. I think this is a good opportunity also to put a plug in for our ECB 2021-12, trying to achieve that certification under LEED version 4. So it will have some information on these credits in there for you to look at and understand maybe when it's an appropriate option to pursue version 4.1. What am I trying to say? 4.1 credits for that specific items. I think that there were a lot of improvements under the material selection there. So this is an opportunity for teams to look at what that best practice or path forward would be if you're pursuing LEED version 4. Have any districts had luck earning LEED version 4.1 material credits? I will say yes. We have had at the Kansas City district a very early on pilot project that received version 4 as it was originally written. But I do understand there's a risk to that one, you know, because that was the first one. So that was really LEED working with us so that, you know, they change over the years and move into a rhythm in how they review some things. I also believe that we have a mega project right now that just submitted, and I believe that they got those credits also. If not, they're clarifying them as we speak. So I think from what I can tell from industry, who, you know, AEs and people who also work with us, we're having more success with the version 4.1 credits. Kelli, have you had any experiences with that?
I personally have not. I think you guys might be at the forefront on the trying out the 4.1 credits.
Sure. Yeah. So that's what I've been hearing, especially from industry too, that they're having a lot more success in that 4.1. So I think that whenever we're requiring thresholds too, we want to think about what we're requiring in our project. So maybe one of those credits, that's what we did early on is, instead of having the contract pursue 2 points, we had them for sure get one and have the potential for that second, right? But as we see time go on and see examples of earning that, of course, always depending on what you're able to put in your building, then we can maybe make that as a threshold of always getting all of them. Yes, and I agree. It depends on the region, and what possibly you can do. But I know that originally the material ingredient one was a little bit more difficult because manufacturers were not wanting to, here, I guess I'll go back. We're not wanting to disclose the product ingredients, right? Some of that's proprietary. So there was a big hurdle to overcome in the industry to make sure that information they didn't want disclosed to the competitors, right? We're not going out to the world. So okay. So looking at the ozone depleting substances here, the USC is asking us to not use ozone depleting substances or high global warming potential chemicals. And that's where we dive into the EPA's significant new alternative policy, SNAP, which was pulled out of and initiated by the Clean Air Act. So when you go to that website for SNAP, a lot of it is focused, right, because we're focusing on that chemical ozone depleting substance kind of process. There are many of them are actually looking at cleaning products, right? So if you're putting contracts out there for janitorial information, then this should definitely be one of those things that should be in there. And so as a building element, it becomes one of those questions, how do I really apply this here? So when you go to that website, there's a couple categories that jump out to me, and it's really focused on, there's links to adhesive, coating, and inks. And so that's focusing on some of the VOC content limitations and so forth, with your adhesives and coatings. And then also diving into that refrigeration and air conditioning element too. So that's where I would suggest, diving into those links and seeing what products we have options for there. I will note that the UFC also does have an exemption for fire protection systems. So there's not a concern within this UFC in meeting that of the fire protection element there. So you just go to the fire protection UFC to find anything and how you comply there. But we really want to just emphasize that we just shouldn't be utilizing those products, right? Those ozone depleting substances, and really focusing on that environmentally preferred products when we have those alternative options at hand.
Yeah, and I'll just break in to say for the SNAP program, EPA is kind of leading that effort for the federal government and evaluating alternatives. So that's kind of where we go, and our UFGSs are regularly updated. And my understanding from talking with the mechanical cop folks, as far as like refrigerants that are on the prohibited list, like that should all be incorporated at this point in the UFGS. And then as alternatives have been studied and evaluated, we may see, more of that available in the refrigerants that are still out there, that have some of that global warming potential, but then also we're hopeful there will be, significant advancements on like the fire protection systems that we see like in our hangars in the future. So there are focus groups with the EPA and then the other agencies. DoD has a group that's kind of studying this. So as new information comes out, that'll get incorporated into our UFGSs. But good to stay on top of that.
Yeah, and that's helpful. Have it at our fingertips there, being in our specs already, which is a great segue, Kelli, into the prereqs. If we're doing that third-party certification with LEED specifically here, we've got a prereq looking at that fundamental refrigerant management. So making sure that we're not utilizing those CFC-based refrigerants and so forth. So it sounds like what you said there, Kelli, is this should be an automatic almost because we've got that already embedded in a lot of the products that the construction documents products that we're producing. All right, so I'd also like to take an opportunity here when we're talking about this, we'll close up this first section, looking at complying with materials. So it's good to know that there's several parts of our contracts that are actually touching this. So here it's always a good application to see what that front end is looking like and reviewing those FAR clauses. There's, of course, like we said, researching product options to meet all these thresholds, but there's FARs here that are listed just as a reference point of clauses that are specifically calling out each one of these pieces that we are asked to comply with in our UFC. So just wanted this to be kind of a reference there so that we're all aware of how our contract really links together and what we're being asked to accomplish here. Okay, now diving in to that waste management part here. The first one is the storage and collection of recyclables. So right here at the top, we're looking at recycling areas for recycling of 5 waste streams. So that's paper, like corrugated cardboard, glass, plastics, metals. And that's all brought to us by the International Green Construction Code recyclable section. So the UFC calls out the ASHRAE, so that's one and the same, right? It used to say ASHRAE, now it has the IGCC part here, and excludes, it's only calling out the 9.3.4.1. So it's specifically that first part that talks about the types of recycling that we're doing, those waste streams. What I also have on here is specific bolded items that are to the Army policy. So in the Army policy, it calls out the ASHRAE requirement here, but does not limit it to just that first part. So it pulls in, if you're doing those residential projects, the collection and discarding of clean items in good condition, so we're wanting to reutilize or find somebody who will reutilize this material. The fluorescent, the high intensity discharge lamps and ballasts, looking for a collection. So I will talk about collections here in a second. And then same with the electronics and batteries. So as I mentioned, then down here, we also want to keep in mind that there is a proper way of disposing and or recycling according to our jurisdictional hazardous waste requirements. And this will apply then also to my experience doing third-party certification on the next one. So we want to make sure that everybody understands or finds out from their installation what their current program is, right? All of our installations have a designated person or building or process to collect these other items that are listed both in this policy or application to the Green Construction Code, and then what we'll talk about here next. So the environmental offices will know what that is. And in my experience, that's how then we comply in a lot of these ways to these other items here when it comes to potential hazardous waste pieces like batteries could be and so forth. So when we look at our third-party certification for LEED specifically, there is a prereq requiring those streams of waste to be recycled that we were looking at before. But then in LEED version 4, it adds in a requirement to do 2 of the 3 listed here, the batteries, mercury-containing lamps, and electronic waste. So there is, like I said, there's the concern about pulling all that information into one storage place or location. From my experience, our environmental teams and the installations I've worked with have concern that someone will put the wrong battery, right, in the battery collection, and now the entire thing is contaminated. So that's where I suggest to identify that and then narratively describe how we're meeting the intent of this project or this credit, specifically involving recycled materials when it comes to some of these extra items. And we've had success in getting approvals for that because we meet that intent. I don't know if anybody else has had experiences in meeting this prerequisite since it's come out.
Yeah, I don't think that there's like one way that we could point to for how every installation does it. So it's definitely important to talk with those folks at the DPW and making sure that we're documenting what their process and procedures are for collection and any storage concerns that they have for separating these different pieces out to support that. So I think that's
yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. And with you saying that, the conversation, I guess I'll make another plug for us in kickoff meetings. There's so much to do, right, at the beginning of a project, but really to start gathering that information or ask that question right at the beginning is very important because that may affect your design and your layout, or maybe it takes a while to get that information, right? We don't want to be at 95, 100% of BCOES trying to find out did we accomplish what we set out to accomplish because we can't find the documents yet. So early conversations are good here. Alrighty, the next part, this is our 5th one, is that waste diversion. We have a question though here before I dive into it. What happens when the environmental preferred products for a project, or the documents for a project, okay, sorry. And then who reviews or approves them? Is this the project file in the end? Okay, so I guess I'll say my history and understanding of this, and Kelli, maybe you have another perspective. When it comes to projects that aren't pursuing third-party certification, we need to be validating this information, right? We still always have the reporting requirement. We have items that need to be looked at, and so that could be individuals, our team in the field looking at that submittal. It could be coming back to the district. If we're looking at one that's not getting third party, I'm looking for other people in my group. So we're still paying for somebody, right, to validate that they have documentations in the reporting, the sustainability reporting notebook, right, and confirming that they've met those thresholds with receipts or Excel, calculations and so forth, that come through to what's been described in the project. Those are also sustainability documents are required as part of that closeout, which should be pulling into the reporting notebook. So I don't know how consistent we have been, which is one of the reasons I think that third-party certification was pushed and was at a lower level threshold at one point. But we're looking for somebody to review those, and that now falls back on the government to do that if you're not pursuing and paying for somebody else to do it for you.
Yeah, I'd agree with what you stated there. I know for like the waste diversion that we're about to get into, there is reporting required on across the board for what's happening, regardless of if it's pursuing leads. So having that documentation available and verified for turning over to folks at the DPW for Army projects, if they're being requested to provide some of that reporting information in the future, if it's not, I don't think that it's there right now, but there are some checks on the other side of things with those FAR clauses being included in projects. But as far as like additional reporting outside of projects with the third-party certification and meeting that threshold, that may not be there, but we do need to be checking that we're maximizing and following these requirements. And then I think, Kathy, you had a question about local waste haulers if we don't have that available for glass electronic waste. Is the owner customer responsible for finding out how to recycle on their own? Yeah, I'd say so. I know that there are locations that I've been to where there doesn't seem to be a pickup process for that. Sometimes it's aggregated in one location at like a recycling center on base, which puts a lot of the onus on folks that are residing in those specific buildings, scattered around base, and that's not good to see. But yeah, essentially we need to find out like what's available in the area, and what the processes are in place for being able to pick up that recycled content and waste streams when we're providing that in the buildings. But I'm not sure, Nicole, as far as like the level of documentation on the lead credit side, have you seen where they're digging into that process?
Yeah.
Like providing the space in the building and supporting maybe future pickup options.
Yes, and so that's kind of what's indicated in the chat too here. So when we're looking at the lead credit specifically, we're looking at identifying that we are helping to facilitate either current or future services, right, to allow for that. So as stated there, if the service isn't there, at least there'll be room or an opportunity to apply that service later when it comes available in that region. When we're looking at our U of C, that's where, yes, we should be helping our installations or investigating and understanding why maybe, somebody comes to the meetings like, we just don't do glass. Okay, well, that may be true, but we want to probably know a little bit more about why. I know I've been to an installation and was wondering why we weren't designing a recycling waste location or been outside, like next to the trash. And so I was actually able to understand how their current contract is, right, on the installation. So they had it in other locations and they have a process that they ask their building, you know, whoever's that designated almost building manager for each one of these to pursue and to bring, you know, that final collection place, right? So they had a process. So that helped me note that in my DA. It helped me either if we were doing third party, right, explain what that process is here. And so I think if we're just trying to comply with the UFC, we want to explain what's going on. And again, like I mentioned before, if it frankly is, it just does not exist here. We want to identify that, like why, right? You may have an installation that is way out where maybe there's no civilization. Who knows, right? We've got some unique places, and that may be the reason. So, but I agree with you, Kelly. Okay, so then moving into the waste diversion, we, you know, if you've been around, right, we're looking at that construction, minimum construction demolition, waste requirement that used to be that 50% and then moved actually to 60. So that's been a change in the last handful of years. All of the UFGS specification has that in there, so we should be good to go. But really looking here to make sure that we are diverting waste from the landfills, and we are evaluating projects that could potentially be deconstructed and salvaged. So we want to see if there's opportunities for that, if there's a demo part of your project. A lot of our installations have rules of, you know, build one new, take one down, right? We've got opportunities potentially here to salvage items. And so we want to look at that here. We also have the USDA, or the terminology, the Army policy is specific about this 60%, but then it also goes on to actually encourage to meet their goal towards net zero. So this is a policy that hasn't been updated recently, but that is still stated in there. So it's always good too to ask your installation if they have any additional goals that they're trying to meet. I know we have one in our region that was trying to work towards net zero in another category, right? So we want to make sure that we're helping them in any way that we can, because that's going to be a part of that calculation in the future. So just really working to understand where the thresholds are and what we should be doing here. Any questions about the waste diversion? We have a question asking about if anybody has seen cost data on the difference between 50 to 60 to 75 waste diversion requirements. I don't know if I've seen any cost data personally. I don't know, in at least my region, I had anybody even in that transition from 50 to 60 even flinch at that, but that may be my region. And 75, I feel like that's a threshold, at least from an old lead. I think we required that on several of our projects, doing full 2 points. I also don't feel like I had any issues with that. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think we routinely exceed that 60%, and 75 historically hasn't been difficult, but yeah, as far as cost data, I don't know that we've got tracking on that information.
Yeah. And Annette's saying that we've seen good outcomes here. I think this is an example of a sustainability effort that one that started pretty early, pretty ancient almost at this time, but has really met that threshold of finally being a part of a practice, right? Looking at something that really comes through as something that just is second nature with construction to some extent there. So I do have some, Billy, we also said something here, typically site is, yeah, so Billy's indicating here that a lot of times we're able to meet that, and of course our region has all those potentials, but again, right, if you're way out in another location that it's just, people don't even come and pick that up, or there's no haul place, that maybe it's not life cycle cost effective, right, to go out there, and we have issues. You also could potentially have a unique project that has something going on with it that you know, a contractor could come back and say, I know that this is a goal, but I don't know how we meet this for these reasons, right? There could be something unique out there. I've also had questions to just me, but really, I think for the group, we're talking about documentation for the construction waste and demo. So we get those for sure when we're doing third-party certification. It's required, you got to report that. But it sounds like some people are having struggles with that when we're not, so holding that contract requirement. And then there's a question about that recycling in the craft database. You may have to remind me, or Kelly, do you know, is that the one that DPW responds to? I'm trying to remember.
I think this question has to do with USACE reporting for projects, since indicating civil works.
Oh, sorry, I skipped over the CW. Yep.
Okay, yeah. How about we follow up with you on that? I know Marty Sedgwick was our lead on that, but she's moved on. I need to find out who's leading that up, unless Billy, you happen to know, for Civil Works, who's got the lead on that. I think there's someone else I might know of that was supporting metrics that's hired a new attendant, so I can try to find out who could support on that end.
Yeah, I remember seeing data put out. But yeah, I don't know exactly where or when that gets applied. Okay, so more to come with that. Hopefully we can track something down, or if you guys know, of course, we have our MS Teams group, so if you find out something, feel free to add that as part of the chat. We can learn together in this and make sure we understand how either others are doing or what headquarters maybe is telling us. So.
This is Antonia. I just found the question in chat. Oh, it's from Eric Haskell. From Eric Haskell too. So is that Eric asking the question?
I think so.
Yeah, it's my question. I was trying to follow up. I know Mike Riegert had started the process but hadn't made much luck on it yet, so I'm trying to follow up where he left off, but I didn't have a good contact.
Oh, yeah, so who in construction, I don't know, but we can certainly, Eric and Marty and I, well, I'd have to do my research, but can help on that craft guidance. But yeah, Eric, if you need someone in E&C, I can't help with that.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it sounds like things to learn and things to improve on. So we can continue to learn that. Alrighty. And speaking of reporting, just another plug for that record card documentation, looking to see what we're tracking and indicating is being completed per the UFC, And then here with our waste diversion, there is actually a percentage diverted. So that, in my understanding, is what's applied and what we find out, right, from those receipts, those documents pulled from the contractor. So that should be updated for that final construction record card documentation there. Okay, another lead credit that is in there that doesn't really fully fit in one of our specific categories, but just wanted to touch on it. There is one based on the building life cycle impact reduction, but there are specific kind of paths that are available depending on what your project is. So we've got that historical building, renovation, abandoned buildings. We've got the building and material use, the whole building life cycle cost assessment, all of which gives us different results potentially in our points that are contributed to that project. So I know that ECB probably dives into a little bit more information here, so I would direct us back to that. I know also from some of my assessments that really when you are working with a historical building or a renovation or something, I would encourage people looking at this one. It may be a good opportunity. Of course, like we say, in any situation, we want to do this initial assessment and see where you are at the beginning of a project and what you want to maybe pursue further, or how well can you obtain it. So credits are always good to try out, work through the information that you know at a charrette level or 35% to ensure that you really can get to that goal for that credit point. So this would be one of those. Alrighty, we're actually right at 2 o'clock. Are there any outstanding questions you want to handle as a group here? Or feel free to reach out to anybody, any of the instructors. I and Kelli can answer questions too. All righty, I'm not hearing any additional questions. Well, I really do appreciate everybody's time here today. I know there were a lot of presentation options today and this week, so thanks for picking ours. And really, if you do have any additional questions, please reach out. We'll try to do our best to help. So have a great day.